Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Best Picture nominee for the year 2023 and decide which one of them we think is going to win that goddamn fandangled award. I'm Timo.
Goddamn fandangled award.
That's right. That the award that we are going to... Today, we are determining whether or not Steven Spielberg, Sammy Spielberg, whether his movie... The Fabelmans will be worthy of the Academy's top prize. Of course, my name is Timo, joined by Abram, Tanner, Tucker. We are here trucking through all of them. We're so close to getting done with all these. And I actually really want to talk about this movie because I already know what score I'm going to give it. And it is rare for me. You're right about that. But before we talk about The Fabelmans, before we get into the monkey business, the filmmaking of it all, we've got to remind ourselves what happened last time. Yeah, I know you're excited about that, Tanner. Last time, we decided to talk about the film Triangle of Sadness, and while we had fun talking about it, I don't know if we had as much fun watching it. We only gave it a 6.6 out of 10, and so it's at the bottom of our list at place number... It probably is. I mean, I'm going to give Fabelmans more than a 6.6. I'm playing my hand early. I don't know. I feel like it.
Sure.
All right. And the next thing that we've got to do is hear from Abram, who's got a featured comment from last time. Is that right?
I do. But this is a featured comment going all the way back to Everything Everywhere. Because, again, we're behind. There's like 9 million Quest episodes left to go out. So I went back into the mines. I will say I checked our 80 for Brady review for a comment. There were no comments on 80 for Brady.
Damn.
So we're back at EEAAO with a good personal friend of some of the members of this panel. I would want to say a communal friend of all of us, Abby, who writes the following. I think the issue you raised with Jobu Tupaki mainly comes from the Daniels under-characterization of her in the script, largely because her backstory is so uncomfortable to the rest of the movie. That Alpha Evelyn abused Joy to the point where her being was irreparably damaged. Her nihilism is specifically a trauma response to the pain her mother inflicted on her, and she wants to destroy the universe around her because the universe is what ultimately destroyed her. But this fact is kind of just tiptoed around in favor of making the audience not hate Evelyn, even if it wasn't Evelyn that specifically abused Jobu. It just seems like the script tames the blatant suffering she went through to make the conflict more ideology-based rather than focusing on the interpersonal damage done.
Wow, that's a very interesting point. Man, thanks for the amazing comment, Abby.
Yeah. Speaking of films where there is maternal abuse of a child, The Fabelmans.
The Fabelmans.
Classic Oscars trope.
Who wants to give a plot synopsis?
Timo, why don't you give a plot synopsis?
Yeah. Hey, smart guy. Why don't you do it?
All right.
Here we go.
Go recap juice going.
Sips IPA.
Recap juice ingested. So, The Fabelmans is a movie about young Sammy Fabelman who grows up with his parents in post-World War II Arizona and discovers that from a young age he has more than an infatuation, an obsession with movies, and he must make them. And it follows the life and struggle of this family as both Sammy Fabelman and the rest of the family have a come-to-Jesus moment about their mother and the relationship that both parents have with each other. They end up having a divorce. There's a monkey that gets purchased because she needed a laugh. And
That's true.
Eventually, Sammy Fabelman makes the high school ditch day film about everyone in his high school class, including some bullies that he has and the girlfriend that he gets in high school. And it all rounds out with him having no clue what he's going to do after high school, but meeting John Ford, played by David Lynch, in a pretty insane cameo at the end of the film. Did I miss any important points in The Fabelmans? The divorce.
We'll get into all of it in due time. But I do want to go around the horn and ask again. How many of us have seen this film before? This is my second time watching The Fabelmans.
Yeah, second.
Second time
Mine
for
as
Tucker
well.
and Timo as well. Abram, first time?
First time.
Wow.
First time dipping into The Fabelmans. Abram, what'd you
First time's a
think?
charm.
First time is a charm because I did like this movie quite a bit. I think Fabelmans is great, but I can't quite put my finger on why, for me, it's not more than that. And I'm hoping to sort of unpack that as we have our discussion, because what's here, I think, is an incredibly interesting examination of what it means to create and be an artist, and sort of the ways in which family and art, as the uncle character says, are in
Boris.
constant conflict. And I think that's quite compelling, because when me, Timo, and Tucker reviewed Babylon, Timo was talking about how, in the case of Babylon, he's like, well, I already feel like I got the 2022 film about loving to create and the art of cinema and the Fabelmans.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting to me is I was pleasantly surprised by how much more the Fabelmans is than just, I love to make movies.
True.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure exactly where my issue lies, whether it's in the balance between the love of the craft and and the interpersonal challenge, the ways those things intersect. Maybe we'll get into it, but ultimately I leave the Fabelmans thinking that it is a great drama, but definitely not my favorite of the Best Picture slate.
Yeah. Abram, you bring up a great point. It's one that I really wanted to address in my opening statement, is that in the lead up to this film, all the trailers would have you believe it's a saccharine movie about, man, the magic of cinema, and isn't movies great, and man, Steven Spielberg, he's the modern great filmmaker of our time, and let's watch a movie about how he came to be, essentially. If you didn't know, this movie's basically an autobiography about Steven Spielberg, written partially by himself. But no, the Fabelmans, it somewhat clicked with me on the first time watching it, but really on my rewatch, I was able to really dig into and understand the complex ways in which Spielberg is addressing filmmaking and art, and his drive to create film, and why he does it, and what that means for his relationships with his family, his friends, his peers, and maybe getting into the darker side of like how he uses it as a barrier between himself and the personal issues that he lived through in his childhood. And I think it's all very fascinating. I think we have a number of fantastic performances sprinkled through here. Gabriel Bell, Michelle Williams, Paul Dano, I want to shout out. He's absolutely fantastic in this, I think. My favorite performance in the film. It looks beautiful. Score is fantastic. I love the Fabelmans.
Well, Tucker, do you want to go or should I?
We got a standoff here.
You know what? I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll share my thoughts on The Fabelmans. The Fabelmans is another great movie from Steven Spielberg. And I think what's so cool about The Fabelmans is that while he's done a lot of films that are some of the greats of all time, there are a lot of things that, aside from like the theme of family and children, which pervades a couple of his movies, E.T., Close Encounter, stuff like that, a lot of his movies feel kind of distance because he's trying so many different genres, and he's doing historical films, and he's doing Jaws, which is about a shark, and he's doing Ready Player One, which is bad, and he's doing all these movies.
Jaws is about a shark?
Last time I checked, yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool to watch this guy grow as an artist as you watch all these films, because we've all seen a dozen or more Spielberg movies. He is, as you said, one of the great filmmakers of all time, and getting a film about a topic that has been covered a lot of times before, that films are very inspirational and that we love to create art, but seeing that through the eyes of someone who we know so personally because we're so attached to his art, it's really cool to see what shaped him as a person. Of course, it's a very fantastical version of that. It's lightly based on his past, but I think it still retains that personal feeling of, this is, yes, going to be one of the more simple dramas that Spielberg has made, will ever make, but I think that it's really special because of that. Though, that's also why it's not one of my favorite Spielberg movies, and it's not one of my favorite Best Pictures of the year, or Best Picture nominees, is because it does feel sometimes like we're doing tropes. We're covering ground that we've already seen before in films, and while that's not inherently a bad thing, this movie does all that very well, especially because it's jumping around sometimes, I don't feel like I'm locked in to this narrative. It feels like, much like how Triangle of Sadness was for me, a lot of great scenes, a lot of great moments, but overarching the film, I'm like, I know the family, I know the moments, but I don't feel like I was really locked in the whole time.
Well, for me, The Fabelmans is a very personal movie, because I think that this film very accurately captures the childlike wonder and experience of not only discovering watching movies for the first time, but discovering like making them for the first time. And I just I'm not a personal relation kind of guy when I think about films that I view, but this is the film that gets me on like a he's just like me, FR kind of level. Like I feel very connected to Fabelman's character throughout the film from his lens of movie making. But I also think that the film does a good job building out this other story and the conflict that it sets up with film and art coming into, you know, disagreement and conflict with your family. And so I find that The Fabelmans is a movie that just like it warms my heart. It does make me question my own art and my own role and why I create it. But in the end, it still like reaffirms my love for the medium and Spielberg's love and care for the medium in a way that's I think it's lighthearted, it's easy to understand, but it still has emotional heart. And I think that there's just enough like fan servicey bits in there to really make the Spielberg lovers like very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Would you guys like to hear the nominations that the Fabelmans garnered at this year's Academy Awards?
Yes, I would.
Now, obviously, this film was nominated for Best Picture. Say it with me, that's why we're talking about it here today. But Steven Spielberg was nominated for Best Director. And this film was nominated in Best Original Screenplay. I have to note, by the way, because this didn't come to my attention until today, that each of the exact same people are nominated in director and original screenplay. We have 5 writer-directors in both categories. So, very interesting. And now we've seen all of them. And we were in the process of reviewing the final one in each of those categories.
Was Berger not...
Original
was Berger
screenplay.
nominated?
Original screenplay.
Yeah, but if he was nominated for director...
He's not nominated for director.
Oh, I just thought he would be. Oh, Ostlund took that place. Oh,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. My bad. I'm still stuck in Oster's prognosticating mode, which was
No.
about a month ago at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Anywho's picture,
My bad.
director, original screenplay. John Williams obviously got a nomination for the original score for this film. Michelle Williams was nominated in Best Lead Actress. Whether you think she's leading or not, actually, is up to personal discretion. But Judd Hirsch was also nominated in Best Supporting Actor. Superlative for Judd Hirsch, the longest gap between Oscar nominations for Judd Hirsch, nominated
Really?
all the way back in the 1980s for Ordinary People, and now again in 2023 for The Fabelmans. And it was
A
also
long
nominated in Best Achievement in Production Design.
Yeah, good slate.
Uh-huh.
There. Good slate.
Good slate.
Healthy
Yeah.
slate.
No Paul Dano, which I take issue with, but I digress.
Yeah, I think that the Paul Dano snub in favor of Judd Hirsch is one that frustrates me a little bit because I am a very big Paul Dano fan, and I think that especially with his last few years of roles, he's quickly becoming one of the more accomplished and respected actors of our time. And Judd Hirsch is very good in the small role that he has in this movie, but I'm kind of supporting roles should be much more significant screen time wise. And I honestly, I don't know if this is controversial or not. I don't know if Judd Hirsch leaves too much of an impact on me. He just feels like a blip on the experience of watching the Fabelmans. I like when he's there, but I'm much more connected to Paul Dano and the way that the family dynamic is working. So it's a bad balance, to be honest. I really would have preferred Paul Dano over Judd Hirsch.
Same here. Just because I think that Paul Dano is stellar in this film. But we can start talking about him, or we can start literally anywhere in the film. Where do you guys want to jump off at?
Let's start with the beginning of the movie, just because I just want to shout out that we reviewed The Greatest Show on Earth.
That's true.
And I feel like we reviewed it, and then 2 weeks later, The Fabelmans came out, and I went and saw The Fabelmans.
It was pretty soon afterwards. I was like, I just saw this.
I was like, I know this movie. That whole scene there is just very. I feel it so much. That little Fabelman, little Sammy is kind of scared to go see a movie. Guess who was kind of scared? Guess who was scared of Cars? Man, that was me. I was scared of that movie.
The Pixar film Cars?
Yes.
I thought you meant the vehicle.
No.
Like, riding in a car.
As a young kid,
that would have made your childhood significantly more difficult.
I feel like that early childhood movie watching and then movie making experience in that very short beginning of the film sets us up with everything that we really need to know artistically from Fabelman's character. He he has to be an artiste. He has to be because he saw this thing as a child and it was, seared into his memory as a like the thing that he's got to do. And I think that the all the elements of the film right there at the beginning set us up for the rest of it in a very efficient and yet comedic but also true way.
Yeah. I also love that opening sequence because I think it's just a good encapsulation of what the film is trying to say the whole time about Sam Fabelman's obsession with filmmaking. And from the very moment that he sees that train crash at the end of the greatest show on earth, it has his hooks in him. Specifically, I think it's interesting that he has this like blown away look on his face in the car ride home. Like he's just his mind has been expanded into the possibility of film and the need to control it. I think particularly to control the chaos of it. Because it just hit me while I was remembering this scene that every single filmmaking sequence that we see for the rest of the Fabelmans, save for one, is a rather chaotic or violent sequence.
Oh.
The gunfight in the Western film, or the war movie where the soldier's looking over the aftermath of what he has done, or even like the Mummy or pulling his sister's tooth out when he was young. These are all they're all very chaotic sort of scenes, wherein Sammy is trying to exert some sort of control over them, like his mother points out at the very beginning of the film, when he has the image in his hands that's projected on the screen. It's in his hands.
Great image.
Controlling
Great
it.
image.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tanner, I think you're right. But on sort of a larger level, what I like about that sequence is it sort of demonstrates the way in which the Fabelmans paints film as something that communicates emotion and sort of develops relationships between people and leaves an emotional impact and it evokes an emotional response. There's that line from his mom, from Mitski, who says like...
Not Mitski. Mitzi.
Mitzi.
Close.
I was thinking of Minsky. I mean, I have immortality on the brain. I'm
well,
sorry.
you also said Mitski like the artist.
Yeah, wrong for a number of reasons.
It's okay.
The point is, when Mitzi mentions, when she realizes, oh, I get why he's crashing the train, it's because he wants to be able to like process the feeling of what happened on screen. And when we return to cinema and probably the two other most pivotal moments when Mitzi watches the tape of her infidelity and then when Logan confronts Sammy at the end of the film, we always use the medium as a conduit between people. And I think that's an interesting way to interpret both the creation of and the function of film. And I don't think it's the way that we often see when we see these sort of contemplative Hollywood pieces.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that early section of the film, when he's still very young, is one of my favorite sections of the film. It's before we've kind of settled into who this family is. We don't have Gabriel LaBelle yet because he's a little too old for that. 6-year-old, 7-year-old role? Yeah. A little too old for that. But for me, again, it is those moments in that early part of the film. It is that montage of him making all sorts of little fun home movies with his family that are significantly less extravagant than what we'll see him do in Arizona. But you can see the seeds being planted there of pulling the tooth out and having the ketchup and then and using all the toilet paper for the mummy bit and spraying the water. Like, he is so inventive, even that early on, that he wants to make a horror movie. And I don't know if this is realistic or not, but he rigged up this whole thing in the closet that like springs out his sisters, and it's so creative. And especially, I think my favorite moment of that entire first sequence is what ends it, which I know is a little bit controversial within itself, but is that there's this phenomenal match cut between he's guiding his father into the driveway because they're arriving at their new house in Arizona, and he says, and stop, and he puts up his hand, and we match cut him holding up his hand when he's lived in Arizona for 10 years, and he's in he's in like late middle school with his buddies or whatever, or high school or whatever. It's such a cool way to end this in such a natural feeling way. You feel like you've missed no time at all. He's living in Arizona. He's working on his merit badges. He's got his group of friends, but I never feel like That's my favorite time jump in the film because it's so immediate of, okay, I know exactly who this guy is, and the fact that he's getting money to make a film and going to the movies with his buddies, like, it feels so natural. And it's especially because that match cut is so masterful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if we're jumping ahead on that time jump, I think it's interesting how Spielberg is not quiet, or I guess, about his influences as a filmmaker in this film. He is very clearly saying, like, I watched these movies when I was 6 years old or 16 years old or what have you, and that's what influenced my filmmaking. Sammy directly remakes the man who shot Liberty Valance, and he's like, I'm gonna make a western, and he calls it Gunsmog, which is a funny little. I just love that joke instead of Gunsmoke. Funny joke. But yeah, I think that the filmic influences of the 50s and the 60s are sort of weaved into Sam's life, and it's just so fascinating. And it makes me think of a line. I'm gonna sprinkle in praise for Paul Dano whenever I can.
Perfect.
It makes me think of a line that he has when they're in the car. He's made the western. And Paul Dano is praising him for figuring out how to put the pinholes in the film to make the flashes of the gun muzzle. And Paul Dano is talking about, oh, when I was your age, I would look at this car or something like that, and I would wonder how somebody made this. It's so fascinating. How did they make this? And he's saying, like, that is why, like, mechanical engineering is superior to filmmaking. But this very same is true of filmmaking, and that is exactly what Sammy Fabelman is doing. He's looking at these films, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance by John Ford, or The Greatest Show on Earth, and he's like, somebody made this. How did they figure out how to make this? How to make every aspect of this? And how can I recreate that? And I just love the parallel between, like, engineering Bert, his father, has, and the filmmaking angle that Sam brings to it. Both creating something. It's so fascinating. Such a great relationship that these two characters bring.
Yeah, there's a pretty overt tension in the film, even within the family unit that is the Fabelmans of the arts and the sciences, and it's even directly called out at one point in the film around the dinner table. I believe it's when Monica is over for dinner towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
And I think that the Fabelmans does an excellent job of accurately depicting the sort of uncomfortable tensions between people in close relationships who are talking past each other and do not understand each other's interests or problems or motivations. And I think what's effective as a through line to the Fabelmans is the way we see the ways that the trains are inevitably coming towards the crash in The Greatest Show on Earth. The Fabelmans are coming towards a number of those inevitable crashes also. And I think Steven Spielberg is really good about keeping those sort of tensions under the surface until it's time for the crash. And it happens at several points. It happens when he comes back after getting his nose almost broken by Logan. It happens again when Mitzi says that she is moving back to be with Bert. I think the ways the tension breaks the surface.
By the way, Bert is Paul Dano.
It's all the same.
It doesn't matter.
Biggest problem with the
Abrams
film,
off
should have
the-
picked different names.
Yeah, Abrams off that NyQuil right now, so
I actually
we'll let
am
him
on
go.
NyQuil right now. If you
Yeah.
couldn't tell, I'm a little sick. More than a little bit. But I digress. The point is, I think
Yeah.
that that's handled very effectively. The ways we set up these problems between people that then reach their head as a result of another plot point later in the film. It's very gratifying in a way that feels a little too realistic. And I think that's part of what makes this film quite interesting.
Yeah. I speaking of being realistic, I go back to the relationship that Paul Dano, Bert, and Sam have, wherein he just doesn't get it. I think that's just a pervasive under the surface issue, like you were talking about, Abram, is that Bert just doesn't get that that this isn't a hobby, that Sam is incredibly passionate about this. And just the little lines that he delivers, that he is almost, sort of belittling Sammy and sort of patronizing him about this. He's like, when are you going to grow up with this stuff? That is realistic, as I'm sure many people who want to, maybe go into the film industry or any other sort of artistic industry are familiar with from people, maybe it'd be parents, friends, teachers, whatever. there is that sort of patronizing nature that like, oh, you're young, you don't understand how the world works, you got to get a real job, stuff like that. I think Dano really sells those lines at the same time while being so damn lovable in this film, in the role of Bert Fabelman.
He's such a dad.
He's not just a nice guy, you know? Like he's simple, or he's not simple, he's like a computer genius or whatever who like revolutionized computing in the 1960s. But in the same way, he's just so kind. Like Mitzi says that. He's like, he is the kindest man in the whole world. I could like insult him and he'd buy me a dress. Like that's just how he operates. And Paul Dano brings that gentleness into every scene that he has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's why those scenes with conflict between Sam and his father end up hitting so hard in terms of the themes of not understanding each other or having the scientist versus the artist, which is, as Abram explicitly mentioned in the film. And I think that is the pervasive theme of this film, of the disconnect between people and their interests, and the secret behind all of it is that we're not so different, you and I. We all want the same thing. We want to do what we're passionate about and explore the world in our own ways. But it's because Bert is so understanding and I would say not simple but simplistic in his way of handling situations. He's very calm for the most part. He understands the family dynamic, even if he doesn't understand each person. Or specifically, he doesn't understand Sammy and his goals. But I really do love that it bubbles up in those small moments, and it's mostly tension from Sam's point of view. Bert is always just being a father about it and doing what he thinks is best for his son. He doesn't think that making movies can be a vocation. He thinks that you need to learn how machines work and do engineering and find a real strong, intelligent job, and art is not a part of that, and that is part of his character that makes him believable because he's imperfect in that way. But by the end of the film, when he is being supportive of his son in one of the last sequences of the film and rubbing his back and making him the tea and understanding him on a very personal human level, that even though I don't understand why he wants to do this, I know that he does, and I will do what's best to support him to that goal. And having that last sequence of them having a bond over receiving the letter and making the tea and helping with the panic attack, that's such a great way to pay off the bits of tension that have come between them across the course of the film, because it's been pretty bumpy. I mean, Sam's mostly getting along with all of his family members, but it bubbles up in moments of, no, they don't quite understand me, but you see that come full circle at the end, which is really, really nice bow of things.
Yeah, I really like that ending scene in the dad's apartment. It feels like such a naturalistic. It just seems, you're just like, well, yeah, this is how a father is. And even after all these situations that they've been through, like, this is totally how they should act to each other. I, on the other hand, I want to move into the other conflict of the film, which is between Paul Dano's character and Michelle Williams' character, mom and dad, as they go through their relationship troubles. And like you were saying, I think, Tucker, how we see the conflict through Sammy's eyes. On this second time watching the film, I was definitely a lot more clued into what was going on. And the first time I had some inklings. I was like, something's up. I don't think the film is very subtle about like what's happening between what's Seth Rogen's between
Benny.
Between Benny and Mitzi. I think that it's like, I don't know, hammered home with the camping trip, but it definitely exists beforehand. And I like the way that it just kind of, it hints at what's going on, and then it basically outright says what's going on, but then it lets us sit with it for 45 more minutes before we have to deal with any consequences of what's going on, which I think is a unique choice to let our main character kind of have to like he has to be a moody teenager about it, and it's like a way for him to be this like character archetype that feels natural and feels earned. Like, I'm like, yeah, you're right to be upset and pissed about this, Sammy. You're not just being stupid. Like, I agree with you. You guys, this part of the relationship, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Bert. Oh, I'm about to drop my phone. Anyway, the Bert and Mitzi relationship and the subsequent third wheel that is Benny, is also just so compelling in this, because Mitzi is such a complex character, And I think Michelle Williams does a very good job. She's not my favorite performance in the film. She might honestly be number 3 after Dana and LaBelle. But I still think that she is quite good in selling this sort of like, she's so airy in her sort of presentation and how she goes through life. She's so free flowing, which is in direct contrast to how Bert acts, where he's very, straight down the line, very simplistic. He's an engineer. Every problem's got a solution, sort of thing. That's why I find their relationship so compelling, and why it's so heartbreaking to see that she cares for Bert, but she sees Benny as this sort of kindred spirit. He's just so fun-loving, like her, essentially, but she can't be with her because she still loves Bert, and they have the family together and all of these things. And I think she is complex. I haven't really come down on, whether she's a good mom or she's a bad mom. She does hit Sammy that one time, but she seems really mad about, or she seems really sorry about it, so I don't know. But I think there is that complexity to Mitzi that makes her so compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's quite interesting with the Fabelmans is the way that it just sort of depicts a family unit kind of in free fall, but wherein the different members of the family unit aren't all on the same page about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that it constructs this this affair being had as a secret between Mitzi and Sam is quite compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And because it sort of, again, it sets this seed that it never really comes back to any importance that he knows and everybody else doesn't know, but we as an audience member know that that's a piece on the chessboard, and I think that's quite effective. And I want to especially just highlight the moment wherein Sammy leads her into the closet to watch the film, and there's this beautiful shot of her face as she's just reacting to the film. We see a little bit of it, but then we spend most of the time in this small sequence on her face, and just the ways that the realization begins to form. Mm-hmm. And then the camera cuts, and it's Sam on the bed waiting for her to come out, and it feels almost as though the parent-child roles, if not reversed, are just completely obliterated.
Yeah,
I think the film does a really nice job of sort of establishing what feels like a pretty traditional nuclear family, and then flipping the roles in ways that just feel wrong and feel weird, and letting us as the viewer just experience that, and sort of the tensions that it brings, again to my point from before, until it all just spills out in a really ugly way when the divorce is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that subversion is actually really interesting. I didn't think about it much while I was watching the film, but now that you bring it up, this film it's very picturesque in its depiction of the 60s as this time to be growing up, when there's lots of technological innovation and film is on the rise, and filmmaking, especially by independent filmmakers, is just coming to be. And we see it depicted through some things that are pretty tropey of the high school prom and going to the beach. Like, these things are like almost cartoonishly campy in like how tropey they feel. But I think that it is earned in that the central conflict of the film is almost a gender role reversal. If you think about who the characters were in 60s films that this film is aping on the aesthetic of, it's the mom who is the caretaker of the children and is staying at home and focused on taking care of the kids, and it's the father who wants to explore life and take charge of what's going on. But in this, it's Mitzi being the one that is struggling with her infidelity and doesn't quite know if her artistry fits into the lifestyle that she has. And I do really love that they're subverting that, but it's all through Mitzi. I think she's the heart of that, and why, for me, she is one of the best parts of this movie. Is I think her character is complex in very believable ways. You see this woman who does feel somewhat trapped in the family that she loves, and you see the emotion on her face when she's like trying to explain situations to Sammy or be commanding in certain situations. But I do love that inside her you see this balance, like tipping different directions at all times. Like, is she in the scene going to be like wacky and fun-loving and super spontaneous, or like try to rein it in and like tilt the scale back the other way and like no, Sam, I'm your mother, and this is gonna be this way because I'm a mom and I know it's best. But it's always it's like a spring. She's like taking herself to like be a home mother, but you can see inside her at all times. Like she just wants to snap back to being fun loving and doing spontaneous things like getting a monkey or whatever it be.
I use the word complex, which Tucker also used, but I want to zero in on what I mean about that by the usage of that word. And I don't know if it's so much because complex is a very broad terminology. I think what I mean is that Spielberg is so honest with this family portrayal in a way that other Fabelman types, as Tucker has a entire letterbox list.
No, I call them Belfast likes.
Oh, Belfast likes, excuse me.
Belfast
which include Belfast or Armageddon Time from 2022 as well. Those all seem to, they pride themselves on being like, this is what my childhood was like. Exactly.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, and I'm pouring it all out on the screen for you, the audience. But in the Fabelmans, it feels so much more real than that. And maybe it is because it's literally like it's removed from that. Like Spielberg is putting up a sort of veneer that it's the Fabelman family, and his name's Sam Fabelman, and that's Steven Spielberg and stuff like that. But anyway, my larger point is that it feels more honest, and therefore, I hesitate to use the word darker, but that's the one that comes to mind. These moments. It's weirder, I guess. Like I don't know if any other director would create a moment where they are watching their mother dance in front of them in a see-through dress between your father and the man that your mother is cheating on your father with. Like that's just a weird thing to write and direct, and Spielberg does it with such grace in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Or directly following that, when he's in the hospital room with his grandmother dying, and Spielberg makes the concerted decision to do a close-up of Sam focusing on the vein in his grandmother's neck, pumping one last time before she dies. It's such an odd decision.
I don't even know how they do that.
Yeah,
I don't know
effect
either.
is mysterious to me.
It's
Yeah.
probably CGI, but anyway,
well-
it's like it is so like offbeat from other Belfast likes that
Yeah.
sort of have a fantastical veneer to them.
Okay, I here Timo goes, combining two different readings of this film into the one central
my
unit.
God. Okay.
Here we go.
Synthesis.
So the reason the film does these weird stuff is I think it's very hyper aware of its own filmicness, and I think during the parts where we have these intense like familial moments, they're actually like more movie-esque, and they take on language and elements from very cinematic experiences and become kind of like hyper cinematic in a way. And so the film is, I think, trying to make this statement that Fabelman Spielberg is viewing these moments of his real life and like almost seeing them through a camera lens. And he is, he oftentimes literally is. I think the way the film is shot is trying to communicate to the audience that like this is being seen by Sammy as a more than real like life plus kind of event. And that happens throughout the film in moments that seem like they are very not informative upon his life. They have a big, they're impactful. That's the word. Those moments like the dancing, I think the monkey moment falls into that category. And then I think some of the stuff in high school, especially with what is her name, Monica, I think that also falls into this category of these like, they're movie-esque. They're kind of a-realistic, but they fit so well into the story and into the style of the film that like I don't notice them as not being realistic until kind of long after thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanna zero in on one moment in particular that I love. It's when we are entering the new house that that Paul Dano's character buys for the family in California, and I think to set the stage for why I think that scene is so important, we see Sammy use a camera in a very interesting way throughout this film, in that he uses the camera for fictional narrative in very distinct sequences, but most of the time there's almost like this documentarian sense to his use of the camera.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about the footage he shoots is that Spielberg is very deliberate in showing the process of editing film. And I think what's interesting is that it feels like everything we see in the film and the way the characters react to what Sammy creates is almost pushing back against one central lie Sammy tells at the end of the film when talking to Logan, which is, I just put the camera on the beach and I just shot what it saw, and that's what I put
No,
out.
you didn't.
Impossible.
Yeah. And I think that the film continually reinforces this idea of film as narrative, both in the context of what Sammy is doing, but then in the context of the Fabelmans as a movie.
Yeah.
And the reason I like the moment that we enter Bert's new house is because it's this interesting middle ground where it's silent aside from the clicking of the reel.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just watching Sammy's viewfinder, but we're watching the version that he has yet to edit. And there's an interesting moment when Sammy gets tapped on the shoulder by Bert to turn around and watch him carry Mitzi through the door frame.
Mm-hmm.
But we see before the quote unquote shot would take place, and then after also, as their faces light up and come back to normal, as they're playing up what will then be edited by Sammy. And I just think that that's a really interesting moment that illustrates part of what I think the film is trying to communicate about filmmaking and the role of the director and cameraman as having a perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important also as another one of these just intimate reflections on what that family unit is like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just quickly on the note of the line about I just put my camera and on the beach and shot what was in front of me. Sam Fabelman, Andrea Bazan would like to have a word with you. But I want to get to that all in due time, because that is my favorite scene of the entire film, is that confrontation between Sam and Logan.
Yeah.
But on the note of Spielberg recounting this tale of his youth and his parents, I want to say something that I saw in a TikTok recently, and I know we're crossing over these two worlds. It's dangerous.
Any Subway surfers in this video, Tanner?
No, well, maybe.
Family
But
Guy
anyway,
clips?
yeah. But anyway, it was someone talking about how Spielberg so clearly waited until his parents were dead to make this film. And in this context, there was someone saying, like, that's why he made, like, Ready Player One and the BFG. He was, like, sort of spinning his wheels waiting for his parents to kick the bucket, which is dark, but, like, it comes across in, like, an interview that he did about it. The interview asked Spielberg why now to make this film, and he basically said, oh, it felt like the right time, and Spielberg's parents had recently passed away, so there you go. But I think it does inform, like, just what he wanted to do with this. And we'll never know how true to life any of these events really are to Spielberg's childhood, but it feels so real. It is, I think, the point for me. And rather, it feels so informative and compelling to where he is as a filmmaker, and to Sam's character more specifically, is that the entire family unit just mixes together so well. And I do want to talk about Judd Hirsch, because I think, he's the point. He kicks down the door and starts talking about sticking his heads in lions' mouths. And he's really when Spielberg and Kushner say, here's what the movie's really about. Okay, ready, folks? Judd Hirsch is going to explain to you what the movie's about.
Hey, we have a turning point in the screenplay, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know.
It's the start of the second act. Let's do it. Uncle Boris shows up, and he's like, art, family, they'll tear you in two. But what that scene is really about, and why Sam is so, like, at the end of that sequence, he is afraid of what Uncle Boris is telling him, is that it hurts to love your art more than your family. And Sam clearly does, I think. He loves his art more than his family. That's why in each of those moments, the grandma in the hospital room or the dancing at the campsite, why it feels, as Timo said, that he's watching this through a camera lens, or the sequence Abram was talking about with the new home, or even for a split second in the scene where they are arguing about the divorce, when they're really telling the kids for the first time, Sammy's sitting on the stairs, he looks in the mirror, and what does he see? Spielberg just puts in just for a moment where Sammy has a camera and is filming his family arguing about this.
Mhm.
It is a
It's
masterwork,
not-
I think, in telling you what it's about, but conveying it in a very artistic, gentle, and straightforward way.
Yeah, I really like that moment that you brought up there. I had forgotten about it. It's like he's seeing himself commit the
Yeah.
the voyeuristic
He
act
feels
of filming.
so guilty about it, but he can't help it because that's just how he operates.
Because,
he
yeah,
operates through this lens of
once you
looking
start
at his
through
family.
his lens.
Through this lens, looking at his family as inspiration for his art, and as art
Yeah.
as a barrier between himself and personal relationships.
Yeah. Excellent point. And the way that it comes across at the end of the film, other people want to talk about it. I'm going to agree with what you guys preemptively have to say about that thematic idea and its implications and implementations at the end of the film are very well done, and I think create a 3-part thematic cocktail that is powerful and well said.
Yes.
What are the 3 parts?
We've got the love in the family and the relationships. I think that's probably that's your main
Part
part.
one.
Maybe it's part 1, and then there's the love of filmmaking and the desire to make art that lasts. And I don't know what the 3rd part is, because I thought that the love and the relationships conflicting with wanting to make art was a 3rd theme, but it clearly isn't. So it's a 2-part
Sure. Yeah.
That's all right.
thematic
That's okay.
cocktail.
Yeah, I think that all of this comes down to one of the more interesting framing choices of this movie, as you guys were talking about, is putting the film through Sammy's eyes, and we are really only able to understand what other people are thinking because it's when he, as a person, grows enough to understand what they're thinking. And of course, it comes at opportune times of having a conversation with his mother or his father about what's going on in their minds, or what are their stresses. But having the film be so focused, story-wise and also camera work-wise, as we're talking about, through the eyes of this character, and synthesizing that with filmmaking and filmmaking about filmmaking in interesting ways, allows it to feel like a very personal story. And I push back a little bit against this film feeling like so real, because I think that this film is more hyper real. I see it as rather tropey, as hyper realistic, and portraying things with a comedic edge, with a filmmaking edge, with a overly dramatic edge, like focusing in on the shot of his grandmother's vein like bursting its last burst. These are hyper real things, and I view the Fabelmans as like looking back on your childhood through the lens of a camera, and that's why I think it feels so personal to Spielberg, even though I don't think the film feels like real almost at all.
Sure, yeah.
I think it
real
feels
is probably the wrong word. I meant to say like honest. I think is the word
you
I meant to say.
You did say honest, and I do think that is the more apt word to describe it, because the conflicts as we're describing and the complexity of these characters feel very real. Even like him arguing with his sisters about something really stupid, or having his entire family banter around each other. These are very believable things, even though they live together and have done so their entire lives. They still have these conflicts, and that feels very real. But the film presents them in such hyper real ways that I focus on that aspect when I'm watching the Fabelmans. Like, this feels like the movie version of someone's life, and obviously it literally is.
It is.
But I think that is to its benefit, because then it also feels like Sam Fabelman made it. Like Sam Fabelman is thinking about his own life through the lens of a camera, and that ties it back to being through his eyes, and the metatextual context of that, with Steven Spielberg making it about his own life, even serves to further support that.
Now, I think it's insane that you didn't say that his life is very real. REEL.
Oh.
Well, I did actually, but I just didn't spell it out.
Here's the main thing I want to say. Here's what I want to say, and put this in your pipe and smoke it.
I'm ready. I'm packing my pipe right now.
I think we're starting to sort of get to my issue with Fabelmans, and why, for me, it kind of caps out in the great territory. I find that the more, as Tucker's saying, tropey high school section of the film to feel like we're just stepping away from this central tension that we're discussing to focus more so on the idea of Sammy Fabelman as this high schooler facing anti-Semitism and bullying and not fitting into a school and finding first love and everything. And while I understand that on a character level, we're sort of sitting with Sammy at a time in his life when film is no longer important to him, or he's got complicated feelings about what film did to his mother, and he's yet to reconcile those. But I still don't think that the high school stuff is compelling in the same way that these other facets are, because they are distanced from the art versus family tension that I think makes the rest of this film so compelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what's a little bit frustrating to me about that is that there's moments when I think all of these things come back into conversation. For instance, when he pulls that camera that, hold on, testing myself, Benny gives him. And he picks it up and he pulls it to his ear and listens to it. Or we later get the line at the dinner table from Mitzi about how he sleeps with a camera under his pillow. There are these sort of like asides that contextualize the what I'll call the high school section, more so around the high school arc, more so around the themes from before and the themes that end the film. But I'm just not that compelled when we are focusing on Sammy going to school.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I can understand that. I mean, I don't think they're thematically heavy in those moments. And of course, I think they feed into the end of the film. I think that's necessary setup for what we see Sammy reacting to with his peers in the moment where he's talking with Monica, where he like essentially is trauma dumping his parents' divorce on her, and she's like, "Whoa, Sam, hey, listen, man, we're not all about that." It just sort of shows how Sammy is sort of socially inept a little bit. And then, of course...
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little bit. And then, of course, we get the bullying setup, which pays off fantastically with the Logan and Chad stuff at the very end. So I think it's necessary setup, and I just think it's fun stuff. I just like watching the high school adventures of Sam Fabelman when he's... Steven Spielberg's pretending like, yeah, all the girls thought I was a real hot, cute guy. Oh yeah, they were all into me pretty clearly. I think that's just fun stuff.
Have you heard the trivia piece, Tanner?
Yeah, the article about like someone who went to school with Steven Spielberg was like, he didn't have a girlfriend in high school.
Yeah, Abram, I do agree with you. I think that is a low section of the film, primarily because it does feel distance from the family conflict. It is boiling in the background, but I think that putting it on the back burner does feel like it's missing what the rest of the film was so strong at, and also because it does lean so much more heavily into those tropes that I mentioned were probably my biggest criticism of this film. Is I watched bullying happen and I'm like, I've seen this scene happen 30 times before. And of course, it's got that Spielberg edge to it, but even that edge and the filmmaking and the fact that I like Sam Fabelman as a character doesn't make me feel like it's that elevated above just like, yeah, bully, high school jock bully doesn't like the kid because he's different. And those themes feel so simple in comparison to subverting gender roles, as I was saying before, or the arts versus science and the family tensions. That is what the Fabelmans is, and we leave a lot of his family on the relative back burner for that section of the film. And I think that it makes it feel like we have to spin our wheels a little bit as we end the film of, okay, we got to return it to Sam and the family, and we're gonna have the scene with his mom in the kitchen, which is a phenomenal scene, and we're gonna have the scene with him and his dad making the tea at the end, which is another great scene. But that's where we leave those characters, and it feels like we've been missing them a little bit during the high school cycle. They're there, and there's the monkey thing, but it's so focused on the adventures, the marvelous misadventures of Samuel Fabelman, that I think that it loses a little bit of the thematic identity that the rest of the film was so good at. And I think that it could have been, I still like it. I think it's good stuff, but it feels so much more tropey than everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I like it.
Sorry.
I like the section too. Happy to watch a high school drama directed by Steven Spielberg. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like he's done a whole lot of like.
Called West Side Story.
Mm.
True.
Yeah, but I like it without the singing. I feel like to me, this part of the film is kind of, I guess it's the re-embrasure of filmmaking, the re-embracing of
Yeah,
the by
exactly.
Fammy Sableman, by Sammy
Famous
Fableman,
Ableman.
to where he has shunned movie making.
Fam.
And
Please.
yes. And now, I do really like that dinner table scene where Monica is like, "Oh yeah, my dad has the expensive camera." And see, this is another moment is where it's just that he's just like me for real. He has that, ooh, like,
That's a
ooh,
sweet ass camera I'd
that
like
is
to
a
use.
sweet ass camera that I would do anything to use. He's got that look in his eyes. Like he's got that dog
And,
in
he's
him.
sitting back, and he's thinking about
he's
how
trying-
much money would this cost to do the reels, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
he's
see
like-
his cogs turning. It's a great moment.
Yeah.
As a filmmaker, I've been there, man. I've been there, and I really enjoy seeing that put I feel like very faithfully to film. But this high school sequence, while it isn't, I agree, it isn't as thematically deep. I think it's the work that it does to set up and to like kind of crystallize Fableman into being a filmmaker. He was experimenting with it as a kid, but it is in these moments where I feel like his conscious mind is shown the power of what movies can do. He kind of gets that idea in Arizona when he uncovers how they film stuff that you aren't intending to see and how they reveal truths about your family that you weren't ready to find out. But this one, I think, is his manipulation of the truth in the final scene where, like we said, he doesn't just simply sit on the beach and point the camera. He chooses the angles, chooses the lengths, chooses the focus, chooses he's directing it like, oh, let's make this ice cream look like it's bird poop in these people's, like that's very constructed. And so I think that the second half of the movie or not the second half, I would say like the last quarter or so that's the high school section.
It's about the last hour.
Here's what I want to say. I don't remember, and maybe it's just because I love the movie and it was flying by for me because I was just in it. I don't remember the high school sequences being that long, particularly, and just because they are light and fun for me to enjoy in those moments when he gets his first girlfriend and she's some like crazy
She's a
Christian
Jesus
girl.
freak, dude.
So
That's
funny.
She thinks
awesome.
Jesus is sexy, and she's like,
the
"Maybe
shot
we
of him
can pray more
getting-
tomorrow."
The shot of him getting like his first kiss and looking up and having just like the Christ figure like
Yes.
bearing down upon him, that made my mother laugh out loud in the theater.
It's funny stuff. Spielberg knows how to, and here's the thing: he knows how to break these sections up because I feel like if the high school stuff wasn't in the movie, we'd be in an alternate universe saying, "Man, I wish we saw Sammy Fableman sort of more outside of the context of his family."
That's fair.
We don't see him being a kid around other kids other than his two sisters or whatever. So anyway, but I love those sections of the movie so much.
Abram is right, by the way. It is the last hour of the movie, so it's easily half of the movie.
Wow, it doesn't feel like that in my recollection. Doesn't feel
No,
like it took up
really
that much.
feels a lot faster. Like it's the last 30 minutes or something like that. But
Well, I'm looking at the timetable here. They moved to California at 1 hour and 23 minutes, and the movie is 2 hours and 30 minutes long. So
yes.
Wow.
And and of course,
Factually, yes.
it's not like we're in the high school for the entirety of that. It is broken up by family stuff, but But I do want to talk about the film screening at the very end.
Oh.
Unless Abram, did you have something to say?
No, let's just
Okay.
move on to this stuff because this is because I think my criticism is a more large scale towards the quote unquote high school years. We can call it that last hour and the pacing of that. But
Sure.
you're right in that. No, regardless of my complaints about pacing, the setup is worth the payoff that I want you to talk about now.
Okay, I'm talking about it
Boom.
now. So Sam Fableman gets essentially broken up with by Monica, where she's like, "I'm not breaking up with you now, but obviously we're not gonna like spend the rest of our lives together. You're my high school boyfriend," and he's broken by that. Obviously because his parents are also getting a divorce, but. Everyone's having a fucking hootin' hollerin' time with like the teen beach movie, the groovy teen beach movie that he made. And we get back at Chad a little bit by showing off how much of a loser he is and how no one likes him. I do like we get a little bully revenge
Comeuppance.
there. Comeuppance, thank you. Which is a little tropey. I'll give you that, Tucker. But at the same time, we get to the larger point of Logan. Logan as this, like, we see him fucking in the foot race. He's like a Greek god coming around, marching down that sand.
It's
This golden thing.
It's Riefenstahlien, bro. It's like Olympia.
It is exactly that. And Timo, God, I want to get to that in just a second here, okay? So, and Logan is so bothered by this, you know, his girlfriend, who he cheated on multiple times in the film, comes up to him and is like, hey, you're so cool, I want to be your girlfriend again. That's the power of cinema, and I say that in a joking manner. Baby. I say that in a joking manner, but that's also literally what the point of that scene is that cinema is manipulative, and Sammy has manipulated these people to feel these ways, and that's why Logan is so unnerved by what he's just seen. Not only because of how people reacted to him, but because of how Sam portrayed him. It rocks him to his core, and the conversation they have is just pure gold. This is like Tony Kushner and Steven Spielberg they were doing the writing with flames meme thing when they were writing this sequence. I love it so much.
Ooh, that's genius. That's how they were like in the writer's room.
Exactly.
On Zoom. They wrote this over the pandemic.
But yeah, it's just about like the manipulative power of movies. And Logan says, how am I supposed to feel about this? And Sam's like, I don't know, man. I just pointed the camera. And it's literally like an audience asking an author, how am I supposed to feel about the art that you made? And the artist just being like, I don't know. I just made it, you know?
He's young.
He's young. He doesn't understand it.
Because it takes
doesn't understand the power he holds.
No, because real Spielberg today does understand the power he holds, and that's how he's able to portray it in the movies. You can't just guess and come up with these answers.
Exactly. Yeah, I could keep talking about this, but I want to sort of democratize it here. What does everyone else think of this scene? Is it?
I really like this scene as well. I do have a clarification. Does it earlier in the film? Do they say that Logan is Jewish? There's some line about the bullies, one of them being Jewish, I thought.
I don't know.
I don't
remember that.
Or was that okay? Never mind then. Never mind. I was just trying to figure out why did Fabelman make this video so pro Logan, I guess. Like why I was just trying to read his character motivation. Sure. Is it to get back at Chad? Is it to make him make Chad look bad in comparison?
He specifically says that he doesn't know. He's like, I'm not sure why I did this. Was it to make you feel bad? Was it because that's just like how I felt on the inside and did it without noticing? I think that.
Or did I just want to make my movie better?
But doesn't he say directly, I just wanted you to like me for 5 minutes?
He does say that, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
Yeah. But yeah, good scene. Very good scene. I think that the guy that plays Logan, I think that this compliment applies to a lot of the people in the high school arc, high school saga, the Monica saga of the Fabelmans, is that they're all, as I said, very tropey, and I think that it's one of my lesser favorite segments of the movie because of that. But I think that they all play those roles incredibly well. The actress that plays Monica and the guy that plays Logan are like the perfect, idealized, ridiculously cartoony versions of the high school jock and the ridiculous, like, over the top girlfriend. Like, they are so funny, and the costuming and the hairstyling all like plays into like, I've read this comic strip before, like I've seen this in a cartoon, but that's also just really fun, and they do that job really well. And I mean, I don't know if these actors, obviously they're in a Spielberg picture, so maybe they are gonna get more work off this, but I'd love to see these actors, I think, did a great job in ostensibly bit parts, come back in larger ways, because when we get the sequence from Monica when she's like looking around, like trying to find Sam to like praise him for what he's done, or when Logan, actually even like the first time we see Logan, when or one of the first times when he like punches him and like gets down on the ground like pointing at him, like those are some acting moments, and I was really impressed by those.
Yeah, I mean, I also love just the physical moment of Chad appearing in the hallway and just running towards Sammy, and then Logan pushes him out of the way and just kicks the shit out of this kid.
Yeah.
And then he tries to get up and his leg goes. He's like a cartoon character.
Logan like literally kicks him in the ass, like the seat of his pants. Like, ooh, I better get out of here. It is cartoony, like you're saying, Tucker. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's really just a really effective bit of choreography in that scene that I think also just reinforces again the general archetypes of the bully and the bullied reconciling, right? And I do like the moment of them looking at the joint and Sammy not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah.
Sammy's like, I better
it's-
not.
yeah.
Good choice.
And
Don't do drugs, kids.
Don't do it.
it does also reinforce, I believe it was somebody in this Discord call said the notion about the film that Sammy is shooting is very chaotic, and he even just says openly in that sequence, "My mind is chaotic enough already."
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually just a really
From
resonant.
the dark and twisted mind of Steven Spielberg.
We were joking about that in the last episode. And look here we are.
Look how far we've come.
Yeah.
I think the reason I like that line so much is because it reminds me a lot of why I write. My mind is so jumbled that being able to put ideas out clearly onto a page is very cathartic, and I think there's a real beauty to it. And because of that, I want to amend the real to honest classification in this film one more time to genuine. I think
Sure,
there's
Ah.
I think there's a very genuine tenor to what the film is saying about making art of any kind, and the ways that the art becomes a way for you to navigate your own life. Because for as much as the film that Sammy cuts is for other people and for exposing his mother's wrongdoings to her and to making Logan and Chad appear this way, it's also his own catharsis for understanding these relationships. And I think that's part of what we get in that final moment with Sammy there.
Yeah.
Timo, you mentioned Lenny Riefenstahl and how this filming of Logan on the
Who?
beach is Riefenstahlian. Lenny Riefenstahl, for audience and Abram, was a Nazi propaganda filmmaker.
Yes. She made
Very
made Triumph of the Will, made the 1936 Olympics documentary film, made a lot of bad movies that need to be
reinforce the Aryan supremacy of Nazi Germany.
of which then
But also
Spielberg,
she was a great filmmaker.
Spielberg and Lucas rip off extensively for using her techniques to display large groups of evil people in both Indiana Jones and Star Wars.
True.
Those movies are Riefenstahlian too in a hidden yet secret way.
Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
No, well, hey, stop. Refocusing.
That movie
Go,
reminds
Tanner.
me of
You have
Riefenstahl.
some point here. I have no idea what you're about to say.
Yeah,
Hit it.
and this is not an original thought. This connection was made by on Twitter by one Noah Gittell. And again, I'll link the tweet thread in the description, like I did with Tar. But he brings up how this is like an allegory for Jews in Hollywood, and like how Sam like uses the not virulently anti-Semitic Logan, like Chad is like straight up like, I'm gonna beat you up because you're Jewish, and Logan is like sort of along for the ride in that manner, but he's not as like outwardly hateful as Chad is. And Sam uses Logan as like a barrier. You see, he sort of like lifts him up with the films that he makes as a sort of barrier from anti-Semitism. And as Noah points out, that's kind of what early Jewish filmmakers in Hollywood did with stars like
Most of Hollywood.
Yeah, with stars like Douglas Fairbanks and Katharine Hepburn and stuff like that. They lifted up these Aryan American ideals of what like the blonde hair, blue eyed star, if you want, to sort of protect themselves and insulate themselves from the anti-Semitism of
Regular America.
regular America, in the government, in the powers that be at large and stuff like that.
Like
I mean,
Mayer wouldn't even allow like anyone to say that they were Jewish in a movie. Like no characters could be labeled as such because he didn't. And this is like a self-proclaimed thing. He didn't want to draw attention to the fact. He was like, well, shit. Like
Specifically,
specifically,
Life of Emile Zola.
yeah,
Remember?
that's the movie that this comes into a play for. But like 5 out of 6 studio heads are Jewish, and he feels that if the rest of America learns that like the studio heads are Jewish, that they're going to come after him and destroy their business. So he makes it, says you can't say that kind of stuff. And
it's
very
just
very good point.
yeah.
Thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah, if I may, because it just reminded me of the this sort of lie that has unfortunately resurfaced with one Mr. Kanye West about how Jewish people control the media, and how that sort of lie started which is that Thomas Edison, famous ripper-offer of inventions, tried to rip off the idea of the film camera, and so Jewish people had to move out to the West Coast, sort of escape his lawsuits over them, using the film camera, and that's how Hollywood started, and that's why there's this concentration that led into Louis B. Mayer, as you were talking about. And yeah, it just like opened up this entire like school of thought for me while I was watching the Fabelmans. Really made me think when I was watching this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rare
Indeed.
Well, should we
Anything
talk
else,
about
boys?
Abram? You got something?
Yeah. I think the movie ends too many times. This is my other kind of criticism of Fabelmans. I like seeing David Lynch as Ford. I think that's clever. But I do think that I feel like I'm done with the Fabelmans by the time we get to the CBS studio. And all that sequence for me is really done is in a project I'm working on right now where I'm looking at a lot of Lawrence of Arabia stills and a lot of Star Wars stills, sort of get out my ruler and look at how high the horizon line is of the frame to try to determine if these shots are interesting or not.
Classic Star Wars poster behind Timo, as he just pointed to. Lawrence of Arabia in Star Wars behind him, obviously.
Obviously.
But yeah, I just don't know what that last sequence to me really does for me. I almost feel like if we just sort of ended with him looking at the CBS letter in his dad's apartment, I would have been a little more satisfied. What do you guys think about that last scene?
I love it. I'm not gonna lie. I think David Lynch is so funny as John Ford, and it's you know what? It's self-indulgent, and if you don't get Steven Spielberg's life, you don't understand why this scene is here. But I think that for those who know, it's just like eye candy, and I'm okay with it because I know. I don't really. If I didn't know, maybe I would be way less happy about it.
It's an if you know kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just kind of Spielberg. It's just Spielberg having fun in the last sequence of his movie, being like, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, my idol, Sam Fabelman's idol. I go into his office. I get to meet the man who inspired me to make a send-up of one of his movies and send me down this path of filmmaking. And what is the wisdom that he imparts? What is the grand wisdom of one of the best filmmakers of all time? He's got like 8 Oscars lined up on a desk behind him. What does he say? If you put the horizon on the bottom, or if you put the horizon in the middle, it's fucking boring. It's boring as shit.
It's boring as shit.
Excuse me. Boring as shit.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention is that some people have argued Lynch himself. We're going to get into the meta of this scene, that Lynch is kind of like a Spielberg antithesis. Like Spielberg and Lynch occupy a very similar space in film history, except they've achieved that space at the time-wise, and I think
the films
also with the films that they make they're similar, but they are like opposite. And I feel like part of this ending is Spielberg and Lynch like shaking hands and being like, we are both great movie makers and we do totally opposite stuff and we've had totally different styles and we kind of don't see eye to eye on how movies are made, but we both love movies and we respect our movie elders. And so I think that that's part of the meta of the scene. Again, I don't see how this changes your viewing if you don't know anything about these guys, because like you're just gonna be clueless. But if you know even more.
Yeah, and especially if you're also mildly familiar with John Ford and you know that he did not like talk. He doesn't like talking about movies. He never watched his own movies. Like he was the most like locked down guy you could possibly interview, and he'd be like, "No, what? Movies don't have themes." Man, and having like a 2-minute conversation with him that amounts to like frame something a certain way is on that also John Ford meta level. Really interesting, and also now that I think about it, it kind of frames the like intent of the artist or like the experience of the artist conversation in an interesting way. If you know about John Ford and that he didn't really see his movies as artistic expressions, he was a part of the studio system and he made his movies and that was it. It was everyone else that saw his works as great master works of art and super influential and inspiring as they obviously were to Sam Fabelman, but he's like the opposite side of the coin of seeing films ostensibly as Burt Fabelman sees a job. It's like, it's a job, you make the movie, it's for money, it's because you know how these things work and you're doing it in the system, and that's it. That was John Ford's point of view. But again, as Timo was saying, it's an if you know you know sort of thing, and I didn't even think about it just now, but it requires like 6 layers of like, and 3 different filmmakers worth of like historical context to like bring the themes of this ending into like true framing. But so I do think that on that level, it's cool for me, but I also agree with Abram in that it's not, I don't think it's a great way to end the movie, like literally having him just like finish the conversation and actually skip into the sunset.
Yeah.
I think
But
it ends too abruptly.
But we know what happens next. We know he makes that trucker movie, and then he makes Jaws, and history is written.
Yeah.
Like we
Duel,
know
by the way.
the rest of
he
his
keeps
life.
He keeps working on Hogan's Heroes for a
He
while
does that
before
for a
that
little while.
happens.
It's like Star Wars 17. God, I love that movie.
And then he makes Ready Player One.
And then he makes Ready Player One.
This is why I like Quest, because I knew fuck all about John Ford. So I really
He's the guy that made
appreciate-
the cars.
Did you know, Abram, that when he's in the office and we get that pan around the room, the posters are in chronological order. We view them ding ding ding, like this one came out and then this one came out and then this one came out.
Including
How
How
Green
Green
Was
Was
My
My Valley, which we saw, which we
Yes.
reviewed.
Yeah. This is I've gained new perspective. So I still don't think I really like the ending that much, but I appreciate it more now. So.
Yeah.
I think it's
Spielberg
justified.
had to put in Greg Grunberg into the film somehow. So
He's great, and I love seeing him.
I love
I-
seeing him things.
My boy from Heroes.
Yeah.
Can I also just say,
Yeah. Well, you can say, Abram.
I'm just gonna say it.
We'll let it happen.
The score is so fucking good.
It's
I
really
still have to give the score of the year to Babylon, because that's
Oh, of course!
unimpeachable.
Naturally.
But those themes, especially the ones that play over Gunsmog and Escape to Nowhere, are so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like unfair that they even let John Williams make music still, because
He's just goated.
like-
He's goated with the
Yeah.
sauce.
It's just gonna be amazing. He's gonna get a nomination, and somebody who's like fucking toiling away trying to make music just gets screwed, because of course you gotta give
Poor Justin Hurwitz slaving away in the mines.
No, he's gonna
he
win,
got
though.
nominated. Poor whoever the fuck made the score for Bones and All that I really liked that didn't get
Oh,
nominated.
okay.
Or Hilda Gunnadottir, who didn't get nominated for Women Talking.
True. Yes. You have a good point, Tucker.
You know what I really like? You mentioned those Super 8 films. Love the inclusion. Love that we get to watch them. My favorite little meta humor about this movie is that Spielberg himself was like, asked, well, you have the originals. Why don't you just put those in the movie? And he was like, no, we had to reshoot them to make them look better. They were really bad. I was like 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, they
Oh,
weren't.
interesting.
He was like, they weren't good, so we remade them to make them good.
Well, that's
Well,
funny because
which-
I was watching these. I was like,
it adds to the. He's just like me for real, because the shit I was making on my Super 8, which was a little DV camera that's on YouTube. If you really want to dig for it, Dimension, it's there on YouTube.
Mhm.
It's bad. It's not good. And when I make my own version of the Fabelmans, the Timomans, in like 60 years,
the Timomans. Timoman will be the character's name. Why'd they call him that?
Oh God, yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
I
But
don't
I do
know.
think that
He's
it's
just like me
very
for
good
real.
that they remade them primarily because of the context you get watching them be made. I think those are some of the best sequences in the film, and watching how creative and forward thinking Sam Fabelman is as like a 16-year-old.
Mhm.
He's coming up with ideas to like capture huge spectacle films that no one makes films at that scale and with that kind of creativity when they're that age, except for apparently Steven Spielberg, and he's coming up with ways to make it look like there's huge fields of bodies, and that answer is all the guys get up, run around, lay down on the other side of the thing.
That's so good.
It's the sticking the plank in the ground to make the dust come up so it makes it look like a grenade's gone off. Like, those are some of my favorite scenes in the movie, and they're like really where Sam Fabelman as a character like is given his moment to shine, and that makes the theme of his connection to his art even more potent.
Yeah, I do love the analog quality to the sequences of him saying like, okay, I'm gonna do Saving Private Ryan again, but I'm gonna imagine that I just have like a fucking 2x4 and like a pile of rocks. What am I gonna do?
Dad,
I just think-
go grab the sandwich board over there. We need more dust.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what Timo is saying of this being a really great homage to what it is to make film with not only no budget but no tools. So I really appreciate that. Can we do scores? Are we at scores time?
We can do
Let's
some
do it.
scores. If
I
you want to
think
do
Because
some
I
scores,
actually feel
Abram.
like I'm gonna die.
I didn't talk about Paul Dano as much as I wish I would have, but he is just
You talked about him a lot, actually.
Yeah, he tears my heart out and just stomps on it whenever he delivers a line.
Yeah. I feel Gabriel LaBelle also very good.
Fantastic.
He's in the movie a lot. He got a lot of acting moments too.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm waiting on Tanner to get his number
God.
ready.
Oh God, I was too busy thinking about Paul Dano in this movie. Oh God. Oh, get loaded up. Okay, here we go. I'm ready.
Does he know?
Does he know?
Does he know? That's a great Abram. That's a great point. Does he know? I'm ready.
Okay. Let's find out our score in 3, 2, 1. All right. So we have got ourselves a score, and we don't have a tie. Everything is nice and easy tonight.
Oh, thank God.
The point breakdown. Abram can go to bed. Thank the Lord.
Let's see, Abram.
Tanner and I both gave the film a 9.3. Then Tucker gave it an 8.8, followed by Abram's 8.4. So that rounds to a nice 9.0, which is going to put the film in between Tar and the Banshees of Inisherin at place number 4.
Company.
Good spot
That's a great
for
place
it.
for that.
Good
Yeah.
spot for it.
Yep. I really don't have any further thoughts about the placement of this film on the list. That seems like where I would put it.
Absolutely not.
I think it is actually. Oh no, it isn't. My list, my numbers were in order of the movies. If you were to take all of everybody else's numbers out of the list, I would have had the same order up until now. That is. Oh well.
Yeah.
Damn.
The big problem with our list is that Avatar is too high, and that's the big problem with our list, in my opinion.
What a goofy little moment that Spielberg ends that movie on too. Just the camera rearranging to rearrange the horizon.
I do love that.
Just
I think
a
that's
funny,
the great.
goofy time.
It's a great like exclamation point on the end of the scene.
Yeah.
It's like, boink, boink.
Yeah.
And then just the Fabelmans.
The Fabelmans.
Directed by Steven Spielberg.
You're like, oh shit, Steven Spielberg forgot his own the advice that was given to him. Oh, but he remembered.
Should we talk about what we're gonna watch next?
No, it should be a surprise.
All right.
Well, for a long time it seemed like it was gonna be a surprise, but thankfully it seems as though Women Talking will be out on video on demand by the time you're watching this, by the way, and by the time, just in time for us to record the next episode of this show. So the next film we will be talking about is Sarah Polley's Women Talking.
Ooh. So who went and saw this when it came out? As expected. Okay. So the camps are divided as normal. Abram and I haven't seen this film before. Tucker and Tanner have. So we'll have a healthy mixture of returning and first impressions of this movie. Women Talking, this is the one I know the least about. This is like, I don't know anything about this movie.
Yeah, and that's MGM's fault. That's UA being shitty at their marketing. Yeah, nobody knows anything about this movie, and no one can see it until now. God damn it.
Camille just rearrange our webcams a little bit to uncenter that horizon at the end of the episode here.
Oh yeah.
There we go. I'm gonna go down.
Okay, yeah, 2 down, 2 up.
Wait, you have to see my face.
See, I've got all kinds of like.
I think I need to go
like,
up so that
tissues on the
you can
ground.
see my face and it's at the bottom.
Perfect.
No, you know, it's even more interesting if you can't see my face, so I'm going down too.
Here we go.
Until next time, when we speak about Women Talking, stay warm, keep cool, and peace.
As I was telling Tanner, I took NyQuil before we started, so I might fall asleep in the middle of the episode.
We might lose him in the middle of the episode. Abram is off that lean, as the kids say.
Abram, you should get a little sleepy nighttime cap.
Quest for the Bestest, the Benadryl episode, where we each take like 5 Benadryls and do a quest.
We see who sees. We check to see who sees the Hat Man first.
What's the Hat Man?
The guy you see when you take Benadryl.
I can't take any more Benadryls. Every time I take the Benadryls, I see the Hat Man and I owe him money.
Yeah.